Hi, it's back to Shamkir Chess, the Gashimov Memorial, and as we had hoped, the gauntlet was thrown down and Magnus Carlsen stepped up to the plate. Topalov drew first blood, so Magnus had to respond, and he had the white pieces against Wojtaszek, the Polish #1. Very solid player, very booked up player, and that will probably play a part in what will transpire in this game. Magnus opened with e4, c5, and I believe Wojtaszek is a knight-off player, or he has played a knight-off, because after knight c3 we see d6. Of course, the usual move, the most common move is knight f3, and to go to the open Sicilian like this. Knight c3 usually signals that white wants to go with the closed Sicilian, where we develop like this. Knight to e2, castles, and probably f4 at some stage. So let's play around with the colors. Something like this. Another option is to play f4, some sort of Grand Prix, with or without bishop b5. But after d6, Carlsen really surprised people here with the move d4, and I haven't seen this often, if at all, in chess or in top level chess. Well, logically black takes, and now simply knight to c6. Why not? Attacking the queen has to move, and now, well, as I'm looking this up, who has played this? I found 4 games in the database. Vugar Gashimov. So perhaps a tribute to the late great Azerbaijan player. Fantastic stuff, Magnus. He's so cheeky. Okay, Vugar has played queen a4. Bishop b5 is the most common move here. Let's just make sure it was actually Vugar who played queen a4. No, he played bishop b5. Okay, so bishop b5 is the most common move. There do exist other variations where white plays for this against the knight with the knight on f3. So I guess we could transpose here if knight to f3 at some point. Yeah, bishop d5 is a move here as well, and yeah, h6. So yeah, some games by Gashimov in this line, and I seem to recall some line where white has the knight f3 in as well. But Carlsen played a really weird looking move. He played queen to d2, and it's like, what? Aren't you blocking the bishop? What's going on here? He is, but it's making room for 2 things. Number 1, after knight f6, b3. Queen sent fianchetto because the queen is in the way. But once we get these 2 out of the way, what can we do? After e6, bishop to b2. It seems like Wojtaszek is just setting up a regular Sicilian type setup with a6. And now queenside castles by Magnus. A very original setup. It's rare that you see this at such an early stage against the Sicilian. b5 now by Wojtaszek. He wants to play b4. You know, attack this weakness. So f3 to protect the pawn. And now h5. I don't know about this move. If you just get on with it with like bishop b7 or something like this, should be a normal game. But perhaps he was afraid of just lashing out, I don't know, with g4 or something. Even though here it's might be a blunder, actually. Takes and bishop g5. But at some stage, maybe g4, but since white is not threatening it, I don't see the need for h5, which was played in this position. It's sometimes played in the knight-off, but then white has the bishop on e3 and has, you know, the English attack setup, and there g4 makes sense. But here maybe I'm not sure white is ready for it. After h5, knight to h3 by Carlsen. This eyes the g5 square, and remember, pawns can't move backwards, so there's no h6 by black to kick the knight away. So g5 would be a nice square for the knight. Bishop e7, knight to g5, and h4. I have to admit I do not understand this move completely. I have a feeling maybe he thought Carlsen wanted to play like h3 and bishop, g3 and bishop h3 to activate the bishop. And h4 at least is playing against that idea. h4 also has some ideas of knight h5, you know, attacking this guy. And maybe playing around with the black squares. So it's not a silly move. But on the other hand, h5 kind of, I mean, this kind of makes a weird impression, because where are you going to put the king? And that turned out to be a big problem in this game. Now, showing his flexibility, now we have the knight on g5. You remember before we played f3 to protect this pawn, but now with the knight on g5 protecting it, we can actually play f4. So Carlsen doesn't mind moving the pawn again, because the king is stuck in the center. It's very logical to move your pawns here and try to open things up. Okay, now some normal Sicilian moves. Bishop e7, king b1, always play king b1. This is a very common move in the Sicilian, just prophylaxis, getting off the c file where black will quite often operate, and also you're not getting hit with any tactical threats on this diagonal. Rook c8, bishop to e2, connecting the rooks, and the bishop can come to f3 or g4 if something else is happening. Queen c7, and now Carlsen finishes his centralization in the station. Nicely centralized rooks, decently fianchetted bishop, and where's the black king going? This looks very menacing for black. And you know, the computer is suggesting king f8. If the computer is suggesting king f8, then I wouldn't be too happy with black's position. And probably Wojtaszek wasn't too happy, and I think this adventure here with the h-pawn is the main culprit, because he could never castle. He played knight h7 here, which offers a trade, which Carlsen accepted, and now g4, which keeps a white advantage. But Carlsen had a very powerful move here. Can you find a typical Sicilian attacking idea that the world champion missed here, despite playing a very nice game? He could have perhaps capped it off with a very nice move here. Pause and think about it if you want. But I will now show you the move. He could have played knight to d5. And this is very often a typical idea in the Sicilian. Very often in the bishop g5 variation of the knight turf, you see something like this. And here it's, yeah, just crushing. If you don't take the knight, I will just grab your bishop, and I will be positionally better, and all my pieces are great. You still have the king in the center. If you take the knight, I will take this. Now opens up for the rook, and it turns out that black is just in deep trouble. The computer suggests king to f8 when we just take on c6, and still all kinds of trouble. Weak pawns all around the board, discoordinated pieces. White is just winning. The computer is like +3. I also, when I was watching it live, I was thinking, oh, but what about if just moving the knight? And there are some cool lines. Here's just a sample line to demonstrate if black tries to hold on to the pieces. I found one very cool line, like rook b8, queen d3, attacking the rook because we want to take on g7. And now if rook h6, okay, g6, then bishop f6, and this is toast. So rook h6, but now bishop takes g7. You try to defend the f6 square, but I come here anyway. f5, f6 was also possible, but this is very nice, and just shows how horrible the king is here, stuck in the center, because now queen h7. Black is up 2 pieces, but he can't defend here on the back rank. He will lose huge amounts of material after knight d6, pawn takes e6. So yeah, missed opportunity for the world champion. But nonetheless, g4 is a strong move, and we can't expect humans to play perfect chess. I mean, we have the luxury of looking at the games during the game and after the game with a computer, and it's very easy to, you know, say, why didn't you play this? You know, this is obvious, but it's not like that. So g4, this is very logical. I mean, you want to attack, you have some ideas like g5, e5. Black decided to take, perhaps thinking he was activating his own rook, but he's also giving up the h file, which white can use perhaps at some stage. Bishop f6, bishop to d3, threatening e5 and the rook. Double attack, so rook h8, and now g4. Interestingly, black starts to get slightly into the game here. He plays knight d4. And now we have a big threat of giving a fork here on f3. And when I was showing this game today to my students, I had an excellent question. You know, why not take on b3? Because pawn takes b3, bishop takes c3. Black is winning a pawn. But then after he suggested it, he immediately noticed that rook e3 was a very clever move. Because bishop takes b5 now, check. And we win the queen. So after rook e3, black played king f8. Getting out of this, bishop takes b5, so now knight takes b3 becomes a threat. So Carlsen got the knight out of the way, knight to e2. Now some trades, and bishop to c3. Carlsen trades and keeps the queen on, queen e3. The black king is still weak, we want the queen on, we want to try to attack. We have these nice flexible pawns which we can push this way, try to get at the black king. And the only thing we have to worry about is some kind of weakness here on b2, like a5, a4, maybe a3, but this is still hard to execute because, well, you have to take care of this first, and our queen can still swing back and cover everything. So black doesn't seem to have a lot of attacking possibilities, so he's on the defensive here, and I think he should have tried maybe e5 here, just to try to get some stability in the pawns in the center. Also, you're trying to limit this guy, but the move played in the game was a rook to c5. Queen c5 was also maybe a possibility, but rook c5, Carlsen now found a way through e5, d takes and f takes. And here in a very difficult position, Wojtaszek blundered. He played rook h1. Carlsen took it and rook h2. The problem is that if you retreat the bishop, you are getting checkmated in the station. f6 gets mated immediately, and running with the king is met with some check, checkmate Czechoslovakia, no soup for you. So did Wojtaszek miss this? I am not sure. He was down to 7 minutes though against 45, so quite possible. But he did play rook takes e5 after about a minute, so maybe he was let's get the correct board. He played rook takes e5 after about a minute. Maybe he was pinning his hopes on rook e1, and the rook was on c5, so it could be a blind spot that once the rook moves, you have opened this diagonal, and this is what happened. Rook takes e5, rook h8 check, and now a possible blind spot, queen a7. And well, quite possible because Wojtaszek actually resigned after queen a7. Now, why did he resign? With king f6, we can take here on h1, but this will give some counterplay after rook e1 takes, and the queen starts to give checks. But we can actually play a g5 here. This would mean that the black king would actually be in trouble, because after king takes, we start giving checks. f6 we take on g7, and if the king runs, we give some checks here, and then we take on h1 with check, and then the king is in trouble. we're up a piece, and this is just winning for white. So after Queen A7 check, Wojtaszek didn't want to see any more from the world champion, and he resigned. So the first win for the world champion. The force awakens in the world champion, and he's ready to strike. But he's still in second. Tobolov again in the 5th round. So it will be exciting. Tobolov and Carlsen still have to play. Carlsen has a tough program left. But we have a rest day like in the US Chess Championship, so no games on Tuesday. So hopefully some exciting games on Wednesday from Shamkir, the Gashimov Memorial. I really like the subtle tribute to Gashimov, even though he didn't go for the same way that Gashimov plays the variation. But I thought it was quite cool. Anyway, see you on the next one. Bye bye.